had the whole day off and the weather outside was cold and wet. Rain had been falling on and off all day, so I decided to stay indoors and spend my time playing video games. It was a typical lazy day for me, and I didn't think much of it. Around 5 p.m., the rain intensified, and I noticed flashes of lightning in the distance. I cooked myself some dinner, then settled in to watch a horror movie. The storm outside created the perfect eerie ambience, dark, loud, and unrelenting. I turned off the lights and spent the next 2 hours on the couch, completely immersed in the film. By then, the storm had grown even fiercer. The rain was pouring down in sheets, and the lightning strikes felt closer than ever. Thankfully, the power stayed on, but the storm was relentless. By 10 p.m., I still wasn't tired or ready for bed. I got up to stretch my legs and refill my water bottle. As I turned around toward the hallway, I caught a quick movement out of the corner of my eye, a shadow on the wall. It was so fast that I couldn't even process what I'd seen. I froze for a moment, then walked over to investigate. The hallway was empty. I figured it must have been a trick of the light, maybe a flicker from a distant lightning strike. Plus, I just finished watching a horror movie, so I was probably a little on edge. I shrugged it off and went back to what I was doing. After refilling my water, I checked on the storm outside. The trees were swaying violently, and the rain was coming down so hard it looked like the roads were flooding. Big storms like this were rare in our area, so it was always a bit of a spectacle when they happened. Our town wasn't exactly built to handle this kind of weather. I went back to the couch and turned on YouTube, hoping to wind down and get sleepy. I wasn't really paying attention to what I was watching. My mind was wandering when I saw it again, a shadow on the wall behind the TV, moving quickly, like something had just peeked around the corner. I spun around, my heart racing, but there was nothing there. I got up and searched the area, but everything was normal. I couldn't explain it. I'd never experienced anything like this before. Was I just tired? I didn't feel like it. The storm and the horror movie had set the mood for a spooky night, but this was something else entirely. I tried to shake it off, but there was a nagging feeling in the back of my mind that something wasn't right. I spent another 15 minutes on the couch before deciding to call it a night. I turned off the TV and headed upstairs. I still wasn't tired, and the strange occurrences had left me feeling uneasy. To relax, I hopped in the shower. The warm water helped calm my nerves, and I was in there for about 5 minutes when it happened. A loud, violent thud echoed through the house. It was so powerful that I felt it vibrate through the floors. My whole body shivered as I quickly shut off the water and got dressed. The house was eerily silent now, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I stepped out of the bathroom and slowly made my way downstairs, my heart pounding. As I walked through the living room and into the kitchen, I saw it. The back door was barely hanging on by the top hinge, completely open. Splinters of wood were scattered across the floor, and the other hinges looked like they'd been ripped out of the door frame. My stomach dropped. I ran back upstairs, locked myself in the bathroom, and called 911. The whole time I waited, I was convinced someone was in the house with me. But when the police arrived, we quickly realized the truth. The door hadn't been forced open from the outside. It had been ripped off from the inside. It was as if someone had swung it open with such force that it slammed into the wall and tore the screws out of the frame. Whoever it was had been inside my house the entire time. The shadows I'd seen, that was them moving just out of sight whenever I turned to look. I have no idea how long they were there or what they were doing. Watching me, waiting, and why destroy the door like that? It was as if they were angry or frustrated. I've never been able to sleep well in this house since that night. Every creak, every shadow, makes me wonder if they're still there, lurking just out of sight. This happened last winter, though I can't recall the exact date. What I do remember is that it was a week of heavy snowfall, and I barely left the house because of it. At the time, I was working a hybrid schedule, some days in the office, some days from home. Because of the snow, I stayed home all week, working from a small desk in my bedroom. My house is small, just 1 story with 2 bedrooms, so it's not exactly a sprawling space. On this particular day, I woke up, made coffee, and sat down at my desk to work. I stayed there until around 8 p.m., barely moving except to refill my mug or grab a snack. Outside, the wind howled, and snow fell relentlessly. When I finally got up, I made dinner, cleaned up a bit, and then decided to take the trash bins out to the curb. As I walked back to the front door, something caught my eye. The snow on the left side of my house looked off. Everywhere else, the snow was smooth and undisturbed, but over there, it was messy, like someone had been walking through it. I walked closer to get a better look, and my stomach dropped. There were shoe prints, clear, unmistakable shoe prints, leading right up to the side of my house. What made it even creepier was how close they were to the house itself. This wasn't just someone passing by. It looked like they'd been standing right next to my bedroom window. I followed the prints, which led all the way down the side of the house until they suddenly stopped. At the end, the snow was all scuffed up, as if someone had been pacing or standing in one spot for a while. And that spot, directly outside my bedroom window, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Why would anyone be out in this weather, walking around in the snow, and stopping at my window? I tried to reassure myself. The blinds were shut, though they had small cracks where someone could peek through if they really wanted to. Still, the thought of someone standing there, possibly watching me while I worked at my desk, made my skin crawl. I went back inside, trying to shake off the unease. What else could I do? Whoever it was, they weren't there anymore. I triple-checked the locks, closed the blinds tighter, and went to bed around 11 p.m. Before I fell asleep, I looked out the window one last time. The snow had covered up the tracks, and there were no new ones. That gave me a little peace of mind. The next morning, the first thing I did was check the window again. My heart sank. Fresh shoe prints. They were almost identical to the ones from the night before, leading right up to the side of the house and stopping under my window. I threw on my jacket and boots and ran outside to investigate. The prints were clear, but there was no sign of anyone nearby. The rest of the yard was a smooth, untouched blanket of snow. Whoever it was, they'd come and gone without leaving a trace, except for those prints. I called the non-emergency police line to report what was happening. I knew they probably couldn't do much, but I wanted it on record in case something worse happened. After that, I tried to focus on work, glancing out the window every so often. The snow slowly filled in the prints, and I didn't see anything else unusual until that night. I finished work around 8 p.m., long after the sun had set. The night was bitterly cold, and the wind was still howling. I got up from my desk and went to the window, pushing aside the blinds to check the snow. At first, I felt relief. The snow was smooth and undisturbed, but then my eyes drifted down to the window latch, and my heart nearly stopped. It was unlocked. I was sure I'd locked it the night before. I triple-checked it. My hands shook as I reached for the handle and pushed. The window slid open easily. My mind raced. Whoever had been outside my window must have unlocked it during the night. How had I not heard them? And worse, had they gotten inside? I backed away from the window, my heart pounding, and crept into the hallway. Every shadow seemed to move as I made my way to the front door. I grabbed my keys, threw on my boots, and ran to my car. I called the police and waited in the driveway, too scared to go back inside. The snow was too deep for me to drive away, so I had no choice but to wait. About 10 minutes later, a police officer arrived. He went inside to check the house, and I waited in my car, every second feeling like an eternity. When he didn't come back right away, I knew something was wrong. Finally, after what felt like forever, he emerged with a man in handcuffs. Both of them were covered in blood, clearly having been in a fight. The officer explained that the man had been hiding in a hallway closet and had attacked him when he was discovered. The man was in his mid-40s, with a look in his eyes that sent shivers down my spine. I don't know what he was planning or how long he'd been in my house, but the fact that he was capable of violence made me realize how close I'd come to something truly terrifying. I've never been able to shake the feeling of unease that night left me with. Even now, I double-check every lock and window before going to bed. And I can't help but wonder, what would have happened if the police hadn't arrived when they did? Last spring break, I decided to visit my parents in their small hometown. It was my first time using Airbnb, and since the town was so small, the rentals were surprisingly affordable. I made the 2-day drive and arrived just after sunset. As I pulled into the driveway and started unloading my things, I couldn't help but notice how eerie the neighborhood felt. It was unusually dark. No streetlights, no cars driving by, and no one walking around. The only house with lights on was the Airbnb I was staying in. The rest of the homes were almost completely dark, with just 1 or 2 dim lights visible in the distance. I figured maybe that's just how things were in this town, but it still gave me an uneasy feeling. I went inside, unpacked my things, and settled in for the night. I didn't have any plans other than resting after the long drive. I grabbed some snacks, turned on a movie in the bedroom, and tried to relax. A couple of hours passed, and it was probably around 9 or 10 p.m. when I heard something that made me pause the TV. It was a knock at the front door. I checked my phone, thinking maybe the host had messaged me, but there was nothing. The knocking continued, persistent and urgent, so I got up and went to the door. When I opened it, there was a man standing there, probably in his 30s, wearing a black winter hat and a worn-out red flannel. He looked confused when he saw me, almost like he wasn't expecting me to answer. I said hello, and he gave me an awkward smile before his expression went blank. He mumbled something under his breath, turned around, and walked away without another word. I stood there for a moment, watching him disappear down the dark road. I closed and locked the door, feeling both confused and unsettled. Maybe he had the wrong house and was too embarrassed to say anything. I tried to brush it off and went back to the bedroom. The rest of the night was uneventful, and I woke up early the next morning to spend the day with my parents. I didn't get back to the rental until around 6 p.m. I was exhausted, so I went straight to the bedroom, turned on the TV, and relaxed for the rest of the evening. But then, at around 9 p.m., I heard it again, the same knocking at the front door. This time, I was more worried than confused. I checked my phone again, but there were no messages or calls. I approached the door cautiously and looked through the peephole. It was the same man wearing the same hat and flannel. I cracked the door open just enough to ask, "Can I help you?" His reaction was almost identical to the night before, but this time it was more dramatic, like he was genuinely shocked to see me again. I asked if everything was okay and if he was looking for someone. He stared at me with a hollow expression and simply said, "No," in a flat, monotone voice. Then he turned and walked away again. I closed the door, my heart racing. Who was this guy, and why did he keep coming back? I went back to the bedroom but left the door open so I could hear better. Something about this situation felt deeply wrong. A couple of hours passed, and I eventually turned off the lights and went to bed. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to complete darkness. The house was silent except for a faint sound coming from outside. A whisper, maybe? Then, suddenly, there was a loud, aggressive knock at the front door. It was so forceful that it shook the entire house. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding, and crept into the hallway. As I moved, I caught a glimpse of something, or someone, moving past one of the windows. When I reached the end of the hallway and looked out, I saw the same man standing further back in the shadows. But he wasn't alone. There were others, hiding in the darkness, waiting. My body went numb with adrenaline. I turned to go back to the bedroom to grab my phone, but as I did, I locked eyes with another man staring at me through the back window. Panic surged through me, and I sprinted back to the bedroom. As I called 911, I could hear footsteps, dozens of them, running around the house. It sounded like an entire group of men were outside, trying to force their way in. I heard windows rattling and doors being tested. The next few minutes were excruciating as I waited for the police to arrive, listening to these men surround the house. Finally, I heard sirens in the distance, and within seconds, the men disappeared into the night. When the police arrived, they contacted the Airbnb host, who seemed more annoyed than concerned. It was strange, considering what had just happened on his property. The police never figured out who the men were or what they wanted. Over the years, I've tried to make sense of it. My best guess is that someone else had stayed at the Airbnb before me, someone who knew those men. Maybe they thought he still lived there and were confused when they saw me. Or perhaps they were angry with him and thought I was hiding him. The host's odd reaction makes me wonder if he had some connection to them. Whatever their intentions were, I'll never know for sure. That night left me shaken, and I've never stayed in an Airbnb since. Even now, I can't help but wonder what might have happened if the police hadn't arrived when they did.